You are listening to the Body Charge podcast, and I'm your host, Sandy Sanderson. Today's podcast is about chronic fatigue, metabolism, and mineral balance. Energy is a valuable resource for all biological systems. When metabolism and energy production drop below a certain level, disease sets in. Metabolic issues can progress to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, immune system disorders, and cancer. Research is showing that metabolism depends a lot on mineral balance, yet these days people have a lot of issues with digestion and food supplies becoming mineral depleted. To discuss these issues, I have with me a very special guest, Hope Pedraza. She's a certified holistic nutritionist, nutrition coach, functional diagnostic nutritional practitioner, a hair tissue mineral analysis expert, Reiki practitioner, human design guide, as well as a comprehensively certified Pilates instructor and founder of Imbalance Studio. Hope is also a host of a fast-growing podcast called Hopeful and Wholesome. I like those terms, hopeful and wholesome. And what a great name, Hope. And I know you're going to give our audience a lot of hope about health. What interests me a lot about minerals, because of my own journey of mineral depletion with magnesium, and that's what led me into founding my own manufacturing company, Elektra Magnesium, to provide transdermal magnesium, because my digestive system wasn't working very well. I had a lot of stress and I became very magnesium depleted. And so the more I researched and studied it, the more I found that there's this interplay between the minerals, where it's not all or nothing. We have to look at a whole group working together. For instance, there's a special relationship with calcium and magnesium. So as magnesium drops, calcium doesn't do what it should be doing in the body. So it can leach out of the bones, settle into soft tissue and joints and make us stiffer. And then and that can lead to osteoporosis, because then you don't have enough calcium in your bones anymore. But there's still in the whole body the same amount of calcium. So I could not, before I did the research, figure out how can someone still have a high amount of calcium in the body, but they've got calcium deficiency symptoms. And then I discovered it was the low magnesium which was causing the calcium deficiency symptoms. And as magnesium is raised, the body rebalances itself and those symptoms disappear. But there is a relationship with a bunch of other minerals as well. So I feel like we need maybe some software to push a button and go, what happens if this goes down? Does that make something else go up? That would be good, wouldn't it, Hope?
It would be so good, be so helpful.
So what have you found in your area of expertise? What kind of mineral imbalances do you see most often in people when you do the testing?
Yeah, I mean, magnesium is a big one. And just like you said, the relationship between calcium and magnesium is a big one. And it's a big area of concern, because the majority of the time I see magnesium is deficient, potassium is deficient, and calcium is in excess. And of course, I'm measuring from an HTMA, which is a hair tissue mineral analysis. And so it's looking at what's being pushed out into the tissues. And the excess calcium is a real concern. And like you mentioned, this kind of buildup of calcium, what happens in the body. And so often especially lately, I've had quite a few women who have had what's called a calcium shell, which is like this really excess calcium, right? And it's kind of off the charts kind of thing. And it builds this calcium shell around like the cells and the nerves. And so it's affecting cellular permeability. So it's going to affect how minerals and hormones are getting out of your cells. And most of these women that I'm finding with the really high, like really, really high calcium, they've all have thyroid issues, right? Because now the thyroid hormone can't get in and out of the cells. So the calcium and magnesium are for sure an issue. Potassium is another big one that I see very often deficient. And this also has a big relationship with the thyroid, because potassium is responsible for our cell sensitivity to the thyroid hormone. And so I find so often, even if someone isn't necessarily diagnosed as hypothyroidism or is something with their thyroid, they still have the symptoms of a sluggish thyroid, right? Because they can't really utilize those thyroid hormones as optimally as maybe they should. And I think sodium, I guess the big four, right? So for the fourth one would be sodium, those macro minerals. And sodium is another one that I see so often deficient. And I think at least, I don't know if it's the same in Australia. I'm sure it's similar because I feel
Yes.
like it's kind of a Western world thing where everybody's like, the doctors scare you about sodium because they're like, oh, it causes heart attack and strokes and all these things. When if you really look at what's going on with the sodium issue, it's not necessarily about the intake of sodium. It's where we're getting the sodium from, right? It's the quality of the sodium
And the other
that we're
minerals
taking in.
that are with it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Because if you look at just like table salt, right? It's just sodium chloride. There's no other nutritional benefits at all. It's been stripped of every other micronutrient and mineral in it. And
It
you're just
becomes
left
a
with the sodium
chemical.
chloride. Exactly. It's exactly it. And then if you compare that to, an unrefined salt, like Celtic sea salt is always my recommendations for everybody.
I love
This
that
one has
too. Yeah.
yes, it has anywhere from like 80 to 90 other trace minerals. And so it's able to use those minerals to push the sodium and the other minerals where they need to go. So it's not a sodium intake problem, it's a sodium retention problem because we take in that sodium chloride by itself. Your body just soaks it up, right? It doesn't know what to do with it.
Yes, and sodium is very dehydrating, so
Yes.
it can actually pull the water out of your cells
Mhm.
and cause an imbalance in the other minerals. So the other electrolytes. So you mentioned the four main electrolytes. So inside the intracellular dominant electrolytes are potassium and magnesium, and extracellular are calcium and sodium because they're bigger molecules. But
Right.
when we need a big push, we've got a run or intensive action or some kind of high energy output, we need calcium to go into the calcium channels, magnesium to come out, and then it kind of dehydrates the cell, but it pulls everything together. That's how you get your muscles squeezing because a little bit of the water comes out temporarily. And when it's time to relax, the calcium comes out and the magnesium goes back in, and with it, the hydration, because magnesium brings the water back into the cell. And so hydration is absolutely crucial and essential with the right electrolyte balance for your muscles to work properly. And that's including the muscles in the arterial wall, the fine, thin muscles of the wall have to flex and stretch and come back again as the blood pumps. And if any of these systems get out of whack because of a mineral imbalance, so you can get cardiovascular issues arising. So your electrolytes are absolutely essential. And I found that magnesium is the master mineral of those because studies have shown the first magnesium drops before we lose potassium out of the cell. And that's because the membrane is compromised. The membrane of the cell helps keep those important electrolytes in the cell and those sodium and calcium electrolytes extracellular where they're supposed to be. And there's a quick change back and forth. But when people become deficient in magnesium, usually from stress, and the kidneys pee it out faster in the urine, we get leaky cells and we get dehydration. And when we get dehydrated, things become acidic and cells get starved of oxygen. So that leads us into pH status, isn't it? If we don't get that electrolyte balance correct, then we usually move towards more cell acidity, which is very destructive, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Definitely.
So do you have in your research, do you know how we measure against what would be a normal mineral balance? Like there's obviously a chart, you're working with a range. Who works out that range? How do we know that's right for everybody?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And it's, here in the States, there's two main labs that I use, or that are used, at least in the FDN world with myself and other FDN practitioners. And the ranges, I will say though, because I used one for a while and I used another one. It's Trace Elements is the name of the lab. And I do say that I like their ranges a little bit better. I think it's, I think it's similar to all functional labs, right? When you're looking at functional labs and when you're comparing functional labs to conventional labs, the functional range is for optimal health, right? Like when you're looking at conventional labs, I always say this to my clients, like you get a conventional lab done at the doctor and it's basically like, well, you're not dead. So
Yeah,
that's
the minimum.
yeah, exactly.
The minimum before death.
That's exactly it. Exactly it. You're still alive. And so when you're looking at functional labs, it's optimal, right? And so I like the Trace Elements lab that I use now. I feel like they're at a little more optimal levels versus the other one. The other one was fine. I just like this one a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, I think the other important thing to note about the HTMA is that, you know, when looking at the lab at face value, you could interpret the lab like 28 different ways, right? You have to be able to look at the individual minerals because it's going to give you like lay out the individual mineral levels. And then it's going to give you the relationships between them, right? So we're going to look at, you know, calcium to potassium and sodium to magnesium and all these specific ratios.
Yeah, they're like a seesaw, aren't they? Some of those minerals work like a seesaw. One goes down, another goes up in effect.
Yep. And you can look at just the individual mineral levels and they may not necessarily look that quote off, right? But then if you look at the ratios, we're like, oh, like, okay, there's actually a big difference, your sodium to potassium, or, you know, whatever. And looking at the ratios is going to give you a lot more detail, a lot more detail on what's actually going on in the body rather than just looking at the individual minerals.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? You mentioned before hypothyroid, and that was my issue. I had Hashimoto's 14, 15 years ago when I was under a lot of stress, and I didn't realize at the time I had depleted my magnesium and developed severe heart arrhythmias. So it is a little bit of a two-way swinging door, isn't it? So you mentioned that as the calcium hardens tissue, it's sort of we turn to stone, don't we?
Yeah, that's basically right.
Yeah. And so then the thyroid is restricted or inhibited from making the hormones it needs. And apart from the fact that we may also be iodine deficient and deficient in other elements. But getting the calcium back in the bone then is a real priority, isn't it? Yes, so we need parathyroid to do that, but you know, you need to stimulus from the magnesium to get that parathyroid system working to get the calcium back into the bones. And of course, you need magnesium to make vitamin D do its job in the body, so become active, the active form, because there's a close relationship between magnesium and proteins, making and activating proteins, which are enzymes and hormones. And so there's a whole cascade of things just coming from the minerals.
Yes, for sure. And then you also want to make sure you have the boron and the vitamin K. All of these are going to help send the calcium where it needs to go too.
Yes, and boron is a great partner with magnesium. It's often recommended as an extra supplement alongside magnesium. I think because it has great support for the detox system, and the immune system needs that, because if your body's holding on to too many wastes, it takes a lot of energy out of the system. It turns it too acidic, and then there's not enough energy, electrical energy supplied to the immune system to do its job to get rid of the bad bugs. So we really have to have a whole body approach, don't we, in this whole thing? It's never really one element or one pill or no instant noodles.
That's true.
Solution.
It's true. And that's why I love when people get the actual data. And that's why I love the HTMA, is because, you know, you can work on things on your own, right? And you can assume that certain things are off. But I find that sometimes the women I work with have almost, in a way, made things worse by taking certain things when they really needed other things. Because like you're talking about this delicate balance, right? And understanding what's going on in your body to really know how to approach that balance. And we're not taking too much of one thing and not enough of the other. And then it's like zinc and copper, the zinc to copper ratio is a very delicate ratio. And that's something that I see a lot in my world, just with so many women who've been on birth control and IUDs and all that kind of stuff. But there's certain ratios that have a very delicate balance. And so I think it's so important to really understand what's going on in your body and know the levels, you know, your mineral levels to know exactly how to balance them out.
Yes, it's important, isn't it? These trace minerals, so we don't need a lot of them. If we don't have them at all, they can cause serious illness, and we need just enough. But then if you have too much, they can also cause serious illness.
Exactly.
So balance is the key issue, isn't it? Wow, it's so important. And today the food supply is very deficient in minerals, not like it used to be 50 and 100 years ago. Unless, of course, you're growing your own vegetables and it's all organic, and, you know, like the permaculture people and the Amish. You know,
yes, if only we could all do that. I know.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, trying to get that balance right without going necessarily to the extreme. I don't know if I could live in that extreme. I still need, you know, to expose myself to a bit of blue light sometimes with internet and screen time. But it's coming back to the balance, isn't it? And of course, what I found with my magnesium research is that you can cope with a certain amount of stress as long as you recover well, as long as you put back what's lost in that stress time. So if you've had traumas or whatever, or if you have kidney issues, any kind of renal disorders, and some people have genetics or congenital problems where the kidneys aren't properly functioning, so the kidneys regulate those minerals, don't they? So if you lose too many minerals, too many alkaline minerals through the kidneys, through the urine, your body is not able to restore balance very well, not able to get away from the acidic waste products. So that should be neutralized. So you're free. So all metabolism causes waste. So free radicals, they have to be dealt with, they have to be neutralized, they have to be eliminated by the body, you know, taken to the liver and put in the colon and you poop it out. Or it can come out in the urine or in your sweat. You can perspire out waste products. Somehow or other, the body has to eliminate those wastes to rebalance the system. And that also is important for the blood, even more so for the blood. The blood has the first priority because the blood's delivering the nutrients, taking away the waste, and supplying the electrical system of the heart with, and the heart we know is the most important muscle in the body, needing those electrolytes because it's got to work 24/7. It really can't have a rest. So, and I found that the heart, the left ventricle of the heart has more magnesium receptors than any other muscle in the body. So that's how important that is. And the other important thing to realize is that the blood, when you have a blood test, if your doctor gives you if you have a blood test and it's a mineral analysis via blood, it may not be indicative of whole of body mineral status. So the cells, the tissue cells, the muscle and bone mainly store a backup reserve of minerals and particularly magnesium. If the blood drops below a certain range, which is critical for the cardiovascular system, the cells, the tissue and the bone give up some of their stored magnesium to give it to the blood. So you could have a blood test showing magnesium in the normal range, but your tissue cells may be very low. And by the time your blood shows up with the deficiency, then it's extremely bad by that stage. Very bad for the cells in the body. A lot harder to recover from that kind of status. So the message is not to wait that long, right? To get a tissue mineral analysis, which is what a hair mineral analysis. So could you get a tongue scraping or other kind of tissue analysis to determine status?
So with this, the particular test, and there may be others out there that do that, but with the particular labs that I use, it's hair. There are some that say you can use fingernails, but it's not really as accurate as hair. So it needs to be, you can use scalp hair, pubic hair. Pubic hair is a little bit, it's going to read a little bit different. Because it's going to show up quicker there. It's better for me. I love to be able to use the scalp hair because it's a more accurate read on what's going on chronically over the last like 4 or 5 months.
Yes, and you can't have any hair dye in there, right?
Preferably not, yes, or at least wait a while. I have my client like wait as long as you can and get as close to the root as you can to not get get the chemicals in there.
Yes, that's very important. I remember having a tissue analysis, a hair analysis some years ago when I was using magnesium, and I didn't realize I hadn't washed my hands properly, and I still had some traces on my hand, and I had touched the hair. So my magnesium showed off the charts. But because I had contaminated the sample.
Yeah. It's yeah, it happens. It happens. Same thing as sometimes we have, if you use any like anti-dandruff shampoo, that can mess up like your selenium levels on there. So yeah, it happens.
Yes, so there's a lot of things to be taken into account, and it's lovely to go to a professional like yourself that understands what the goal is and also how to tailor make solutions for individuals. It's how to read it. I guess you have to have a good ability to see the patterns and read, and also take into account sometimes genetic predispositions, which I heard, some genetic predispositions may mean that you lose a lot of magnesium. For instance, 10% of the population genetically lose excessive magnesium, even though they may not have kidney issues. So there are lots of reasons why some people lose more than others, and maybe need a higher level of supplementation.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the beauty of functional medicine and going a functional route is you're able to, look at the labs and kind of find patterns and connect dots, but you also connect it to the human. And I think that's kind of the disconnect between the conventional medicine world and the functional medicine world is a lot of times, and now granted, I will say there are doctors now who are doing a better job of like looking at you as a human and not as a lab result, but so many of them are just looking at you as a lab result, and you have to be able to correlate symptoms and your environment and your history and all these things to the lab and not just look at the lab results.
Yes, and that's important too, mindset. So I also spoke with a number of psychologists about state of mind, and the more stressed people are, the more they tend to lose the magnesium. And so looking at lifestyle and how people think about life and what their view on life is it a positive mental attitude, or do they look at everything with a negative slant? Is your glass half full or half empty? Is also very important. And that, the personality types A and B and the differences in stress levels between those will also impact on your mineral levels. So working on the whole mind, body, spirit entity is very important, helping it all come together. And what I found too is when you get the balance right, you need less of the individual elements because there's a synergy that pops up, and then everything is effective optimally. Every mineral, every trace nutrient is optimal effectively, and so there's no chance of overdosing or getting too much because everything is working to its maximum capacity, right?
That's right, exactly. Yep. And that's the key kind of to our point earlier, talking about there's that delicate balance in all of them, and once they're in that balance, your body just kind of works like the well-oiled machine that it's supposed to.
Nice. So if people want to learn more or know more about what you do, where should they go to find you?
So you can visit my website. It's hopefulandwholesome.com, or you can find me on Instagram. I'm at @thehopepedraza.
Thank you very much for being a guest on my show. I'm sure people will get a lot out of it.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandy.
Bye-bye. I hope you liked this conversation and will share it with others. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you want to listen to other Body Charge conversations, click like, subscribe, the bell icon, and click all notifications. Subscribe to our newsletter to get updates on blogs, podcasts, videos, and magnesium special offers at electramagnesium.com.au. Relax, recharge, and recover.